CBS News has exclusively learned that the Trump administration has paused all immigration applications filed by migrants from Latin America and Ukraine. They were allowed into the United States under certain Biden-era programs. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez joins me right here in Studio 55. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good to see you here. All right, so you've obtained this internal memo about that decision. Break it down for me. What you learned?
Well, the Trump administration is arguing in this memo, Vlad, that it needs to suspend applications for these programs because of concerns about fraud, and also to be able to determine whether any of the migrants who were allowed into the U.S. under these Biden administration policies could potentially pose a threat to public safety or national security. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and also migrants from other crisis-stricken countries like Haiti, Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua, who, again, were allowed into the U.S. under President Biden, but only on a temporary basis. And so many of them have been applying for something called TPS, temporary protected status, asylum, or a green card because they have a U.S. employer or a relative who is willing to sponsor them. Those applications now are suspended indefinitely.
So 2 questions. What are the groups that offer legal representation to these groups saying and what they're being told by the Trump administration? And if you already have TPS, what does that mean?
So if you already have temporary protected status, you will not be affected by this recent memo and decision by the Trump administration. But it is critically important to note that the Trump administration is in the process of scaling back many TPS programs, including the one for Venezuelans. And it already announced that it is terminating TPS protections for more than 300,000 Venezuelan migrants. And so many of these programs are at risk of being terminated because the administration, Vlad, believes that these policies have been abused by Democratic administrations and that they have been in place for too long.
And with regards to those legal groups that are offering the representation and the guidance to these migrant children, what are they being told about what they should do?
So that is a separate policy change that came down yesterday, too. The Trump administration, Vlad, has directed the legal services organizations that provide legal counsel to unaccompanied children in U.S. custody to halt that work that they do with federal funding. And so now we are told that lawyers who conduct Know Your Rights presentations and legal screenings of children who arrive in the U.S. without their parents or legal guardians and undocumented will no longer happen. And it is also going to impact, we are told, their efforts to represent these minors in immigration court, because just like migrant adults, they face deportation, and judges have to decide whether or not they are able to stay here legally. And now the attorneys tell me that is going to be very hard for children to make their case in court because, one, they are minors, but they're also in a foreign country without access to lawyers potentially now.
All right, Camilo, with that breaking news for us, thank you very much. Exclusive reporting as always. Thank you, Camilo.